I'm sorry, last time I checked, I thought we lived in a free country, so...
No, we don't.
No?
It's the United States of don't touch that thing right in front of you.
On the third bugle blast, I shall loudly announce attack! At which point, we will all jump out of this box.
Great Scott!
I don't trust this kid any further than I can throw him.
Dum-dum, you give me gum-gum.
Well, with your bad knee, Ed, you shouldn't throw anybody.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Don't cross this line!
I'm back.
You, Sagittarius Athletics.
That is not my name.
This town needs an enema.
Who are these people?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the intersection of faith, family, and filmmaking. You're listening to Fearless with Mark and Amber, a behind the scenes of our filmmaking ministry, Fearless Features, where we are creating educational, documentary films about the issues impacting our culture and society from a biblical perspective, and pursuing truth above all else. I'm Amber Archer, and joining me is my husband, author, director, speaker, Mark Archer.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women.
You can learn more about us and the movies we're making by visiting fearlessfeatures.org. It's also a great place to make that one-time or monthly donation if you are passionate about reaching the lost for Christ through film. Visit fearlessfeatures.org today.
Silence! I kill you!
Respect my authority!
Here we are.
Here we are, back for another episode.
We have a fun episode, but we have big news first.
Yes.
Why don't you tell them?
Very exciting. So after 2.5 years of censorship, The Mind Polluters is now available on Amazon Prime Video.
Yes.
So that was very exciting news this week.
Believe it or not, 2.5 years of trying to get that film.
Yeah.
So
on a larger place, it's the largest streaming platform in the world right now.
Yeah. So those of you who have been supporting us and praying with us over this, boy, when we found out, because we resubmitted it, you know,
Hallelujah chorus.
the first time that we submitted it was, and we talked about it extensively here. It was banned, completely banned, due to offensive content.
Right.
And you know, we appealed, and they just said no.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this was during all of the censorship under the Biden regime. We have no idea what has changed.
No.
But I'm not going to argue it.
Nope.
I'm just going to celebrate it and go full steam. So it's not a Prime title, but you can rent or purchase it on Prime Video.
Yeah. So just easier to watch.
Yeah. Way easier to watch.
Share with your friends.
Definitely.
So definitely thank you to everyone for your prayers and your support, and we're gonna just keep persevering.
Yeah, so we're working on getting the rest of them up there.
That's right.
So now we have Inwood Drive is on
Amazon,
and The Mind Polluters.
Yes,
and
Dysphoria Title IX, and When Principalities Eventually Gets Done,
and the Spanish version of The Mind Polluters.
Yes,
is what we're working on next. So we'll let you know.
Yeah.
But it's pretty phenomenal.
And so today we have a special guest. Monica Cline is going to join us. She was in The Mind Polluters and Dysphoria and Title IX. But it was interesting.
And she's in Principalities.
And is she? And now she's in Principalities. But it's incredible when you get to meet people and to hear their stories and their testimonies and where they've been. And even as we were talking through, and I think that she's going to share, I can't remember if we stopped recording and this was after the fact or not, but she was talking about how there was a woman in one of her local, in Texas, she's in Texas, in their legislature's office, who had seen The Mind Polluters a couple of years ago when it first came out and remembered her story, her being in Texas, and she was recently contacted and helped the legislator walk through the process, especially of all the graphic sex ed and sexuality education in the schools. And so we told her we were happy to interrupt her watercoloring, so it's such a reminder of how important, I'm not saying that our work is important. I'm just saying that it is. It's important. We all have a job to do, right? And it's fun and incredible to see the Lord use so many people and bring them together in order to push the truth, especially into society today. So I consider us so blessed to be able to do this work and to continue just to push truth and
what you're going to hear
glorify the Lord.
And what you're going to hear today is along the lines of what we've been talking about, is that these people that have been pushing this into the schools, the NGOs, the educators, they have not stopped. It hasn't stopped. What they're doing now is they're hiding it.
Well, and renaming it,
renaming it. So if you say it really is as simple as, if you write legislation that says you can't do social emotional learning, they'll change it and call it something else.
Yeah.
And they'll get away with it.
Yeah, and so that's really what we're talking about, because through the mind polluters, we were exposing the panorama and all the data mining that was happening in the schools.
Which is all still happening.
It's still happening. But now you just see it brought in under a different guise. And a lot of these things come in through the ESSER grants, ESSR. And it's happened all across the country for especially mental health practices. Everything is on the rise for that. And so, of course, you magically have these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who out of nowhere are readily available to help you implement whatever your state has passed for to comply with, especially the mental health and anti-bullying initiatives.
Yeah. Well, it's like we say in the security world, a deterrent only works if somebody is watching it. You can, and for example, you can have cameras up, but all that's going to do is record the crime.
Right.
It's not going to stop the crime. It only stops good people. Yeah. And they're not doing crimes. So the important thing to remember is these people have not stopped. They have been running full speed on this for 30 years. One election is not slowing them down. There are some parts of the election that are definitely, Trump and his policies have definitely given some weapons, pretty powerful weapons to use, but these people are lawless. Why do we think changing the law is going to affect them? Yeah. They haven't cared until this point, so why would they now? So stay vigilant. So we'll take you now to our interview with Monique Leal Cline.
Yeah.
Sexual predators and comprehensive sex education both break down inhibitions. That's what they start with. They also gain trust with the child and then slowly start to get them towards sexual activity.
Anything goes. You are teaching children adult child sex, you're teaching transgender issues, and children are moldable and influenced by that.
They said, okay, now we need you and your team to be able to explain what homosexuality is to a 4-year-old student.
To introduce this kind of material at that age, frankly, it's child abuse.
You're going to teach our children that it's okay for any two children of any age, of any sex, to have sexual intercourse with each other as long as two components are present. One's using a condom and they both give consent. Did I hear that correctly?
It's not a neutral venue. There's no such thing. Okay, the schools are doing your job. They are discipling your children, but they're not discipling them in the faith of Jesus Christ.
It's only the exceptional child that even survives that system. Most do not survive, most have not survived.
They believe that children are sexual from birth and that they deserve and have the right to be sexually active and to seek sexual pleasure. And if anyone is stopping them from that, then you are judging and oppressing them.
Even kindergarten now, they're wanting to teach them more and more perverse information and acts and put that into the children's minds. And once that poison is in a child's mind, it doesn't leave. They'll always remember what they learned. And it's by design, it's orchestrated.
In my humble opinion, it will be worse before it gets better.
Watch The Mind Polluters, now available on Prime Video. Monica, it is so exciting to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for joining us. Sister, we became like instant friends from the first conversation that we had. But can you introduce to the listening and viewing audience just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do and just a brief overview of your story?
Sure. Well, my name is Monica Leal Cline, like y'all highlighted in the last podcast. And yes, that was how I was raised. That's my name. That really is my name. And when the first time I ever did a podcast that my mom listened to, and she heard me say, "Hi, this is Monica Cline," she's like, "You're not Monica." Yeah. So always listen to your mother. By the way,
more listening.
Yeah, I know. And by the way, if you're watching by video and you see my hair, I'm not my hair flying in the wind. It's because I'm over 50 and I'm hot and I have a fan on. But anyway,
it's
more
a special effects. My name is Monica. Don't hate me because my hair blows in the wind.
I know. It's very glamorous. But anyway, so my story though, so I am a former liberal, a former comprehensive sex educator. And if your audience doesn't already know what that means, that's the very graphic sex education that you hear people are combating all over our nation. And I became that. I took that job right out of college. I graduated from UT Austin, and it was during the time of the HIV epidemic. And I wanted to do my part as a young person and protect vulnerable communities, and especially minority communities. They were considered the highest risk. And so in my liberal, compassionate heart, I decided to volunteer and then was quickly hired by an HIV prevention organization. It was actually a gay organization, but they received HIV prevention funding. And that was my introduction to comprehensive sex education. After working with them for just a few, probably the first month of training, they said, okay, you also have to learn how to share this sex ed message with children. So they sent me across the street to Planned Parenthood, where I was trained by the director of sex education for the greater Austin, Texas region or area. And that's how I got started in comprehensive sex education. I approached this wanting, really believing that I had a compassionate heart. I wanted to help people. I wanted to prevent them from getting diseases and like HIV and other STDs. And I really believed that I was doing the right thing. And when I questioned it, especially when Planned Parenthood started teaching me how to speak to children in a classroom about sex ed, I actually thought that was really inappropriate. And I told them, I said, I think we should be sharing an abstinence message with kids. They should not be sexually active. But they quickly corrected me, told me that I was being very judgmental if I ever spoke to a child, and told them that they should abstain from sex. They assured me that children were consenting to sex and that this was good and healthy for them, and that it was just my job to teach them how to reduce their risk as they engaged in all sorts of sexual activity. And they presented all of it in such a clinical terms. I stood back, even though I didn't really like the thought of children having sex. I thought, well, this clinic is funded by the government. They receive Title X funding. They obviously are reputable because they receive government funding. That was how I rationalized it back then. And I justified my own job that way because we were receiving money from the CDC and from the State Department of Health to do HIV prevention. And so, although it was very graphic, I just trusted that if it was funded by the government, then it must be okay. Mm-hmm. So I did that for over 10 years until I saw the light. Literally, it just seemed like I really saw the light. I started to realize that this was actually harming communities. It was, I started to realize that it was slowly killing high-risk communities, families, and children. Mm-hmm. And so I quit my job and started blowing the whistle.
Mm-hmm. Well, and your advocacy really has taken on so many different avenues. And the reason that, because we sat down with you and recorded for the Mind Polluters. and which is now currently available on Amazon Prime after 2.5 years of censorship. But hey, it works. Thank you, Lord. But we got to talking because you and I stay in contact with each other. And we kind of laughed earlier when we started the show, and I said, sister from another mister, because we just instantly became best friends. And it's fun to catch up and see what's going on. But you started telling me about what's happening at your local school board meetings. And one of the things when we were going through the mind polluters and then dysphoria, exposing all of the ESG and all the social credit scores and things, how these movements are ushering in all of these different, programs and ideologies that are really shackling us and capturing. How can I explain that any better for people? Literally, you're being put in a box in prison. And we're seeing this especially in the schools. And you mentioned something called PBIS and Navigate 360, and that's one of the things that we want to talk about today. Can you just kind of step people through kind of the conversation that we kind of had about you going to your local school board and seeing what they're bringing in through some of the ESSER funds? Because it's exactly the things that we were uncovering and showing people through the mind polluters and then dysphoria. Right. So just furthering the conversation of advocacy.
Well, let's kind of look at the overall picture here. And I want to make the connection right now, which is it is because there is a movement for the state or the government to become the parent of our children. And that's what this is. So when you see the sex education and how graphic it is and how they're keeping parents out of the picture, how they're trying to mandate sex education standards so that the government and the schools, medical community, psychological, the counseling community are all impressing this ideology on our children. It is to create a new family for these children so that they're not listening to their parents. And God established the family. And so that's what my ministry is about, is really equipping and educating and reminding parents that they are the sole authority over their children. So that takes us to this new subject here on PBIS and Navigate 360. These are, and in Mind Polluters, we talked about the whole school, whole community, whole child framework. Mm-hmm. And really now you hear a lot about healthy schools. They're kind of rebranding it. They talk about the whole child a lot. They're not even saying school or community. They're just talking about, we want to reach the whole child because that sounds great. What that really means is that, again, this is about the state or the government becoming the parent of the child, that the child is being parented by the village, and the leaders of that village would be the government. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory until you start to look at these programs and realize that this isn't about parents being the sole authority of their children or educating parents to help so that parents have other options that they can choose to educate their own children. Instead, this is about diminishing the family altogether. Mm-hmm. And so this Navigate 360, and I dug into it a little bit, is a mental health program. And as you said, it's funded through the ESSER funds and several other funding streams from the government. And so we all know that there's this huge push for mental health in the schools. But what we're also seeing is that the more that the schools talk about mental health and anxiety and social anxiety and on and on and on, the worse our children become. They fall into a deeper depression because they're consistently being asked about their emotions and their trauma. And really, they're creating trauma in our children. So now we're hearing these programs. I had some high schoolers come into a meeting really excited about what they were learning in this mental health program in the school. And they described that we all have mental health episodes and mental health challenges. And for example, when you take a test and you don't think you did well, you're afraid you failed. Well, that's a mental health episode. And it's like, no, ladies, that's really elevating it. It's making it bigger than it is. It's just a normal life stressor. Mm-hmm. You're a little worried that you might have failed that test. That's a normal life stressor. It's not a mental health episode. Let's not make it bigger than it actually is. Now, these high schoolers took this information that they were trained on. It made them feel special. It made them feel like they were doing something positive. And now they're teaching it to children in elementary school and in middle school. So here we're seeing peer education, where these children are being taught, being groomed by this ideology that they then teach the younger children. It's not just, it's very manipulative. Now, Navigate 360 has come around because of the increase in all the school shootings that we've seen across the nation. And so they're talking about using technology. When you go to Navigate 360, you'll see on their website, and I'm looking at it here right now, it says one platform for a safe and compliant school. Compliant. I mean, it's just interesting that the words that they choose, language is important. And so what they're literally doing is PBIS is part of Navigate 360, and they're trying to have zero incidents in the schools, zero school shootings, zero violence. We would all love to have zero of all those things. And it used to be where, you and I, when we grew up, we weren't concerned about school shootings.
It was never a thing.
Right. I mean, I grew up in the country, and most boys had rifles on the rack in their truck, and nobody used them against other human beings. So there has been a change in our culture. That's for another podcast. But this particular Navigate 360 is using the whole child model again. And what they're doing is that they're using they're basically a behavior, and they describe themselves this way, a behavior management system. So they have behavior management case managers, and they implement a program called PBIS. And let me move over to what that stands for. But it's basically it's a social credit system. So there's an app, and it's on a computer, or you can put it on your phone, and parents can look at it, students can look at it, teachers see it. And if you exhibit the desired behaviors and attitudes in the school, you get credits. And then those credits accumulate, and the student can then use those to buy things at the school. So they're rewarded for being compliant to the behaviors and attitudes that the school is seeking. And there is some language that I found where they basically said that there's also times when there's needs to be an intervention. Because if a child is not exhibiting the desired behaviors and attitudes, then intervention needs to happen, and behavior management and behavior change needs to happen. And so this is really, this is setting up whoever they choose in the school to be trained in this, maybe it's the entire staff, on what these desired behaviors and attitudes are. And they're going to be constantly looking through that lens at each and every student. And so they're no longer seeing our students, our children, as children to learn mathematics or reading or science or great at art. Now they're hyper-focused on, are they exhibiting the behavior and the attitude that we want? And if they are, we will reward them. And if not, then there will be an intervention. I mean, this is some scary stuff. Our board approved it. They accepted it.
Well, and not only that, but who decides what behaviors are acceptable and not? Because then you get into, well, what about if we're going against, the Christian faith and what kids are taught at home? I mean, are we...
This is just SEL rebranded, right?
Social emotional learning.
It is. It is social emotional learning. They do say that. So as you navigate their Navigate 360, as you go through their website, you will see all that language, the social emotional learning. They're talking about the whole child. Once again, they're talking about mental health, but all of it with a behavior management model and basically a social credit system. Now, I also looked into the funders of this particular program, and it's the Riverside Company. And the Riverside Company also invested in PBIS. And so that's how they merged. So Navigate 360 was a behavior management system, mental health system, using social emotional learning. PBIS kind of existed on their own through another company called Motivation Systems LLC. And so the Riverside company, having invested in both of these companies, have merged them. So now Navigates 360 does come with PBIS. Now, when I asked the assistant superintendent and the board did not reply to me, but the assistant superintendent did. And I did all this through email because we're not allowed to ask all these questions. We're given just a few minutes to present at a meeting. So it's really useless. So I just send them all of my questions. And Amber, I asked them what you were saying, like, who's deciding what behaviors and attitudes you're going to assess?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what those are? I asked the question, are children going to, are these assessments, these behaviors and attitudes, are they going to conflict with family values, faith values? I just went ahead and asked her, like, for example, this is also based on equity. So there's DEI in this. And so I asked the question, if a child chooses not to affirm the transgender identity of another child and refuses to use the pronouns and refuses to use their new name, is that child going to get some demerits? Is that going to be considered something that is like being a bully? Or are children going to be affirmed for following trans ideology? And so she replied with very, very short, like yes, no, kind of answers to protect herself or protect the district, I'm sure. But this is very, even if it wasn't that ideology, it's still a social credit system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still seeking behaviors and attitudes that may not align with parents. And this may not be the form of discipline or the form of behavior management that a parent even wants of their child. And this is not the place of a school district to be managing the mental health or the emotions of a child in any way. And this is probably why we're seeing that our education system is failing academically. Our children cannot read. Our children cannot do math. And because we're inundating them with this ESG kind of social emotional learning ideology that is really harming our kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, I just want to just pause for a moment and point out that you do not have kids in your local school district, yet you are active in watching what is happening. And I think it's so vitally important for everybody to understand that we can all do something to protect the next generation, because these kids need someone, people who are going to be paying attention, because otherwise everybody falls victim and prey to whatever is being pushed into. And I rightfully so, I understand that parents, look, we know that you're busy. We know that, everybody has extracurriculars and you want to, be with your family. But it is so important for us to be involved in what is happening at our local school district, because these kids and these families, we all live and commune with every day. And so just supporting each other. So I just applaud you for taking the time to actually email your local school board and the administration and just ask questions to see what's going on, to help continue to educate people in your community about the things that the kids are learning and being subject to at school.
Well, I appreciate that. But, it's also helpful for the parents because, and I actually told the assistant superintendent this in my email. It's like, listen, these questions are actually from the parents. But they're asking me to email them because they know that if they ask these questions, you're going to label them as hateful and petty people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to interrogate their children as to, why do your parents have these concerns? And they don't want that for their kids. They want peace. They want their children to be left alone and to just learn academics. I'm like, so I'm doing the hard thing so that they are not punished for it.
Yeah.
But I am encouraging parents to ask these questions, though. You have to advocate for your own children. But I would strongly encourage people in the community that even if you don't have children in the school district, you still are a taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
You are still someone who votes for those school board members to be at the school. And in Texas, the school board that's elected chooses the superintendent. So in many ways, when you elect your school board, they're going to be making decisions about the superintendent of that school. the hiring and the firing of that superintendent. So it's really important that people say, well, you don't even have kids, so it's none of your business. Stay out of it. Absolutely not. This is our business. It's our community. It's our state. It's our country. And so absolutely get involved in whatever way God has led you to do that. For me, I can see things that other people can't. They might read this program and think, oh, this sounds kind of nice. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't realize that that's what it was doing. So whatever gift God has given you, utilize that to help the families around you.
Amen, sister.
But I thought, no, we elected Trump, so all this stopped, right? I mean, that's why, because everybody that I talked to, they've kind of gone back to sleep. Like, I voted, and now everything's fixed. Right?
That's not how it works.
This is all just this is all just conspiracy theory still, right?
Yeah. And, and a lot of states are using some of the executive orders to help push back on some of the bad laws in their states. I know California is doing that, and it takes time. But you're right. We can't. It has helped a lot that Trump has done what he's done, and we can use that within our own state. But it doesn't mean you stop. You use those tools that our president has put together and offer to us through executive orders, but then you use that to strengthen your own state and talk to your own legislators. And there are things that, our legislators, when it comes to this topic, I can't talk about toll roads. I can't talk. I mean, I know I have opinions, but my expertise is the family. God has just given me eyes to see certain things. And so it's important that we speak with our legislators, because as I speak to them, I realize they don't get it. They don't have eyes to see. There was a bill that we were talking to legislators about just a week ago that they thought, oh, this is good because it includes parental rights. But if you really paid attention to the bill, it was actually advocating for behavior and mental health programs in the school, no matter who was implementing them. So it could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be anybody, not a licensed counselor.
Wow.
That with parental consent, they would be able to talk to children about contraceptives, emergency contraceptives, family planning, and human sexuality. They thought that this was a great bill to include that when it comes to a behavior program, you have to get parental consent. But the flip side of that, if that became a law, is the parent that the school now has the right to teach those things through mental health, which at this time in Texas, we don't actually have that. That's not in their purview to do that. They should be doing it in health education, which is chosen by the parents of the district. So this bill, had it become law, would have actually opened the door for mental health to do even more than what they're doing. And so it took days of being able to explain this and get on, and also doing social media so that the legislators could understand that this was a bad bill. But some people didn't have eyes to see. All they saw was parental consent. Good bill. Let's pass it. Like, absolutely not. You've just given the mental health community. And actually, like I said, the bill actually said any school representative could talk to our children about human sexuality and contraceptives and emergency contraceptives, have that bill passed. So my point is, you have to read those bills. You have to have eyes to see, and do not assume that your legislator understands all the nuances on that topic. If you're an expert in that because you've researched it a lot, then you really need to go educate your legislators so that they can actually protect family in your state.
And that's what the left specializes in. Whatever they call the bill, it's exactly the opposite. Like the Affordable Care Act actually doubled, tripled everybody's premiums. The Inflation Reduction Act added trillions of dollars I mean, that's what they do. They write
it sounds good.
atrocities of legislation, and then let's put a nice name on it so that the dumb Republicans will vote for it. It happens all the time.
I wish we did have an answer for the school shooting issue. And I don't know all the details about all of the different cases. But I don't think it's this behavior management in the school.
No, and quite honestly, the last couple that we have seen, it's been the transgender. It's been one of these kids on these drugs.
I can tell you
Actually,
that,
yeah.
we were talking last week about the satanic cults, one of them being the 764 and the Order of Nine Angles. Those cults are actually now being linked to, they've been linked to more than one of these mass shootings, because they actually are the ones that are basically programming these kids to go and do these things. And some of the research that I have read and listened to, the school the one down there in Uvalde, that one has been tied to satanic occult programming. Yeah. Now it's nigh to impossible to get that, because the satanic cult members are so embedded everywhere that this stuff will be whitewashed, because they don't want it to be tied to Satanism. They want it to be tied to, a
mental health disorder.
We have a picture of him wearing a MAGA hat, and it was an AR-15. Therefore, we have to take away everybody's guns. That's the narrative all the time. But what's really behind a lot of it, not all of it, but behind a lot of it, is these satanic cults that are actually doing the mental health conditioning, basically.
Well, Sim, I don't know if it was about a year ago, I remember that Pastor Jack Hibbs had a sermon. I don't remember the exact sermon, but in there he was talking about the scripture that talks about sorcery. And he mentioned that sorcery means the use of drugs, and that the use of drugs is an avenue into the darkness of demons and Satan. And I think that not only what we consider recreational drugs, but as we have these poor individuals who have become confused with gender dysphoria, then it turns into it escalates. And, this sinful distortion begins to escalate to the point of violence, to the point of drug use, to the point of using hormones that are now changing your chemistry that God had already originally created. That all of that brings in the demonic.
Yes.
And so ever since he mentioned that, I realized, wow, sorcery is about the use of drugs. It's about altering your mental state. And then we see P. Diddy with the extensive use of drugs as well, with very, the secular culture would like to say, oh, well, hey, everyone, if you want to do your kink, whatever, but if he did something illegal, we should know. Well, this was just a satanic, he's under a demon. I mean, this is just really satanic what he was doing with the use of drugs as well as violence and all of the depraved sexual acts that were involved in all of that. And I'm really glad y'all are doing this, because it's more and more every day that I see demonic influences in people. And it is kind of scary. Scare me.
Yeah,
it is. I thought it would scare me, but I've also been praying for the spiritual gift of faith. And I mentioned that to Amber a week or so ago. And that's really changed me a lot. And so now I see the demonic, and I'm not excited about it, obviously, but I'm not afraid. I have a healthy respect for the Lord, and I know that he's powerful. And with faith, I know that I'll be okay.
Yeah.
But I do recognize that there is a demonic influence, significant influence across our globe. And I recommend that everyone ask for the spiritual gift of faith, because that is what's really going to get us through this, because there'll be many things that we cannot understand. There'll be many things that many mysteries that we won't know how to unpack. but we need to have that faith in the Lord that brings us joy and a gentle and quiet spirit, which is not what the secular world thinks it means. Gentle and quiet spirit for women or men does not mean that you're passive. It means that in the face of a demon, I am unmoved because I have faith in my Lord. And that is humility to the Lord. And it is absolutely powerful because it allows him to be your strength in those moments. And so it's been pretty amazing that in the last week or so, I have been able to be more bold than I've ever been without being angry or competitive. It's like this really a very, all I can think of the word is a very humble submission to the Lord, knowing that he's the one that's making me step forward in these things and that I'm going to be okay and that it's important to share truth. So, I mean, that's my recommendation for people in this is don't ignore the satanic influence and run away and hide. Dig deeper in the word, pray for faith, and trust God. He's going to help overcome this. May his will be done. It may not be what we want it to be, like we want heaven right now. Heaven's coming. It's not going to be right now. We may never be able to fix the schools. I don't do this because I think I'm going to fix the school. I do it because it's the right thing to do, because God loves the children and God hates this evil. And so it's important to point it out whether people like it or not.
Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And if God is for us, who can be against us? All right. Well, we love you, sister, and we will talk to you again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's all the time we have for today, friends. Thanks for listening through to the end, and be sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And share this with your family and friends. Until next time, march on, saints, and be filled with the Spirit.
Hey, what happened? Silence! I kill you!
Man, you are one pathetic loser.